Now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the show, Rockin Company's Rockin CU with Adam Munsterteiger. Rockin Company making Colorado beautiful natural stone rock construction 5 decades, 2 generations. Rockin Company, rockinco.com, and Zadie's Deli, where they are swinging for the fences with those great overstuffed sandwiches with the homemade corned beef, the other deli meats and treats, free parking front and back, 121 Adams Street, and they cater Zadie's Deli. And Adam, you can follow Adam Munsterteiger, Adam CM777. And good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
How are you doing this morning?
Doing excellent. How are you guys?
Doing swell. We've got big news in terms of affecting the world of University of Colorado football, where big good recruiting changes were made. You are the recruiting guy for University of Colorado with buffstampede.com. That's where I go for my news. How does it affect Colorado that there's now a visitation period in April and there is an early signing period, no date established, in December? I think this has got to help Colorado, even though Colorado has gone from one of those teams that is a team that got rated by other teams when they were building the program under McIntyre, and now they're more like a team that could be a Raider that could get late commitments if the students didn't sign in December.
I think overall it helps Colorado mostly because of what you mentioned there in terms of having the ability to bring out prospects on official visits late spring, early summer. They're going to allow those official visits now on a recruit's junior year beginning in April and through June. And I mean, let's be honest. The weather here in those months is better than most places, and so to be able to bring out a Texas recruit in June or a Florida recruit, I know Johnny Huntley and Anthony Joel-Meese, when they visited, took their unofficial in June. They were just shocked. They thought there was going to be snow on the ground. There's this misperception of Colorado from a lot of kids that age, and so they were able to make it unofficially. But some recruits can't afford that. It's for a Tyler Lytle that can have the means to go out and take an unofficial visit to most of the 29 schools that offer you a scholarship, that's great, but a lot of kids don't have those financial resources. And so I think it's good for them, too, just to be able to take those trips, because the recruiting process has been so accelerated that most guys are committing now before their senior year. So the fact that up until now with this rule change that recruits haven't been able to take official visits prior to that, it was ridiculous. So I think that's the biggest change with this new rule, and I think that's going to be good for both recruits and for the University of Colorado.
I think his whole thing is terrific for the students. It is. And, Mike McIntyre on record is saying they'll have to tweak it just a little bit on the next part of the rule, which I think is the biggest change in all of the rule. For a long time, SEC schools have been famous for signing many more student athletes than scholarships are available, locking these guys up at prestigious programs and then weeding them out and cutting them loose late in the process. Right now, only 25 letters of financial aid, 25 signings are available for each school. I think this is the part of the change that could drastically level the playing field in college football.
Well, back in 2011, there were some changes in terms of the conferences tightening up the rules on the number of guys that a program could sign, and that kind of fixed the SEC issue. For a while there, they were oversigning, and they were almost cutting bait with guys that they didn't feel could hang in their program after a year or two, and that just wasn't the way you wanted to run that. It was almost becoming too much resembling a professional franchise, but they kind of fixed that issue. The oversigning thing has not been a major issue the last handful of years. From what I've noticed, you're just not seeing the SEC schools, signing over 30 kids anymore. That's just not happening, and it actually could negatively affect you. Even if you're not cutting corners and doing things shady, like look at Colorado, for instance. Mike McIntyre comes in, fixes the attrition issue, and they have a big senior class last year, and so they were able. They signed 29 with the class of 2017, and it wasn't anything like they were cutting bait and doing anything like some of the SEC schools did that were shady back in the early 2000s. It was just that they had a big senior class, and so I think that part of it, to me, I think that's going to get tweaked. I actually saw Mike McIntyre mention that he thinks that's going to get tweaked a little bit too. Just you're not seeing that as being as big as an issue as you were 10 years ago.
Another thing I saw come up this week, and I'm asking you how serious you think it is, or if it is serious. The the Coaches Association, I don't know the acronym, pardon me for that, recommended that, hey, you know what? Maybe we should pay more attention to starting times for games to benefit the student athlete rather than necessarily benefit the network that's paying us all this money.
Hear, hear.
And I know Colorado football, I was like, wow, man, I feel for these guys playing a West Coast game and then getting back and then trying to get ready for the econ test or whatever.
I feel for the fans who are sitting there on a November night in the cold for television when you have gorgeous fall afternoons in Colorado.
Okay, but they don't care about us. I get that, but I care about the student athlete. Do the coaches have any chance of making a dent with this or not?
I doubt it. At the end of the day, I think it's the dollars and the TV money that's going to speak loudest. And let's be honest, if you're playing a game at noon on a Saturday versus an 8 p.m. game, you play the noon game, is that student athlete in his dorm room at 8 o'clock that night with a book open? Probably not. So I get the road trip and the travel can be pretty tedious, but again, these are college kids. They're probably not going to bed before 2 a.m. anyway. So I don't know. I don't see that as a major issue. I think, like Michael mentioned, it's more of an inconvenience for the fans that, especially families with young kids that don't really want to be up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning watching or attending a football game.
Yeah, I mean, I would have bought season tickets years ago if they held the games on Saturday afternoon. There is nothing better to do in Colorado than to sit on a fall afternoon watching football. I don't care if it's the Broncos or whatever, but when you play at night in the fall, it is freezing here. Kids,
I mean, it's at the end of the day, though, TV revenues what drives this thing. I just don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, and the better Colorado is, the later at night they're going to play in prime time. So that's the other catch-22. Some Colorado athletes, Xavier Johnson and Derek White, are at Portsmouth Invitational auditioning for the NBA in an all-star type format where they play several games. After one game, I talked to a couple of scouts who are looking at these guys, and Xavier Johnson, first scout, told me, looks out of shape. He had 12.6 rebounds in that game, but had two ugly threes. In fact, his opening shot was an air ball, and he felt that Xavier hadn't done anything to help himself, at least in that first game. And again, there's more games to come there. He said he's an undersized power forward who thinks he can shoot. So clearly he wants Xavier to trim down and be a. And the second scout I talked to said, yeah, to be successful at the next level, play professionally anywhere, Xavier Johnson's probably at a high level anyway, is probably going to have to be a small forward, not a power forward. But and I also heard a comment about Xavier's reputation of not being an easy guy to coach, would be putting it politely, at Colorado, had followed him there. Second scout I talked to wasn't nearly as negative, but said he's athletic, he's strong, but he needs to get stronger. He has, because of his athleticism, he has some potential that he could play defense, and he needs to be a 3 and not a 4, but also cited the fact that he was a very erratic shooter, to put it mildly. So I think those are all things we saw here, and I don't think anybody's optimistic that Xavier will play at the next play it in the NBA. But I think he's not out of the woods on having a developmental league contract. I think more likely, my guess is we'd see him overseas. Derek White, on the other hand, his first game played well, shot well. He was 4 for 8 from three-point range. He didn't have a good shooting percentage overall because he went to the rim a number of times and got blocked, apparently. But he was aggressive and scored 18 points, 4 assists, had only 1 turnover, hit all 4 of his free throws. But he said there's a lot of interest in Derek White. He was intriguing as a big point guard. And the feeling was he's still learning to play, which we watched him do this year with the ball in his hands. He was adjusting to that at the Division I level for the first time in his senior year. So the key, was to look at him late in the season and one of the two scouts that I talked to, was very encouraged by Derek White's performance.
Yeah, and actually last night he had another really good performance, 23 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals. So he followed that up, and they have another game tonight. I think with Derek White, the key is can he prove to be consistent shooting the NBA three-pointer? And the way the game has evolved, Derek White is a good shooter, but not a great shooter. And he's one of those guys that seems to make them in big moments, but I think for him to make it in the NBA, he's going to have to really be consistent with that, show that throughout the summer league this summer. And so I would imagine Derek White's going to be logging long hours in the gym just shooting that NBA three. I think he's got the other tools to make it. As his senior season at Colorado kept evolving, he just kept showing that he had better athleticism than maybe you thought that he did going into it. So I think he's got a chance for sure.
Adam, thank you very much. I know we're in a big recruiting period starting this week. We'll catch up on recruiting next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, and everybody, catch up on it by reading buffstampede.com. That's Rockin Company's Rockin CU, brought to you by folks who make Colorado beautiful with natural stone construction, and Rockin Company and Zadie's Deli, 121 Adams Street. Incredible food, great portions.